Palo Alto Unified School District. Come to order. Okay, good evening, everyone. Let's start with approval of the agenda. Oh, the board met in closed session and took no reportable action. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda order?
I move. I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay. We're going to start out with a consent calendar. These items are considered routine and will be approved in one action without discussion. If a board member wishes an item to be removed from the calendar, or a citizen wishes to speak to an item, will be considered under action items. Does anyone have anything they want to remove and discuss? Or do I have a motion?
I move the adoption of the consent calendar.
Student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
Colleagues?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Go back here again. Okay, open forum. Do we have, I know we have some cards. We've got at least a card, right? No, you don't have them yet. They're just down there.
We're earlier than we normally are, so
Yeah,
maybe give people a little window.
a few minutes to. It is only 35. I wonder if we should actually do the superintendent's report.
I think we should.
First. Think we should do this?
No, because we keep changing what time we start open forum. We should at least wait till.
So I suggest doing during open forum, beginning with what we have now, and then maybe doing the superintendent's report and seeing if there's other cards, because I know we
Two
have.
open forums?
How's that?
Well, there are people here now.
We have
Yeah.
someone ready to speak.
Wait, is this another? Situation? Another student, okay. All right, so we have one card, Connie Lou. Why don't you come on up to the microphone? You've got 3 minutes.
Okay, I can say a few words on behalf of Connie Law. I'm Connie Law's mother, Charlene Leah. Connie attended the school district throughout her public education career. She received special education from the district. And my other daughter attended and graduated from Gang Hai. And at GLS was in principal office charge. So Connie now is with a group of special needs children who are now developing independent skills, including job skills. And she is in a Lego club for children and youth with special needs. She built this heart-shaped candy dispenser and sold it. Sorry. Sold it at a fundraising gala. So many of our board members came to the fundraising gala every year, and thank you for your attendance. And so she wants to take this opportunity to present this gift to the board. Connie, you want to say a few words?
I made it for you.
Thank you so much, Connie. I loved it when I saw it at the gala, and then I'm so happy to get it.
Connie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's because Come paid for it. We are selling this because of their work product. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you so much. It's beautiful. We're gonna, thank you, Connie. Thank you.
Connie, thank you so much.
Thank you so
It's
much,
beautiful.
Connie. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
And Mr. Dauber, you had some plans for it, right?
Heard it was good for Skittles.
So, right, my plans for it are Skittles, and I thought it might actually live here in the district office where I can see it and also our staff can see it. Because one thing I know that everyone loves is, I will.
Great, thank
Connie,
you.
thank you. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Connie.
That was fantastic.
When you open it up.
Yeah, I'll open it.
Okay. How long you like your hand? Some tears.
Thank you.
Connie, you're the best.
Thanks, Connie.
Okay, I think that is all for open forum. So let us go on to, thank you, Connie. Let's go on to superintendent's report. Dr. Ross. It's for later, it's for another agenda item.
But you're going to open it up in case somebody else comes in.
Keep going.
Ms. DiBianca?
Yeah.
If after the superintendent's report, we
have another
make
one.
another call
We'll go
for
back,
open
yeah.
forum.
And let's try to tell people that right at the beginning is where, it seems like more and more often it's happening at 6:35, 6:40. So we'll try to convince people that they should be here right at the beginning. We get to it quickly.
Can I, though we've approved the agenda order, maybe,
Uh-oh.
well, since we have a student card for an item that is later in the agenda,
And it's a student.
I'm wondering if maybe we want to do a quick change-o presto with the agenda order?
And let him, oh, you want to move the agenda order?
Yeah, and move this, move this item up. We could still do the superintendent and the other reports, but then move it ahead of the action items. Just because we have a,
I am okay with that. Does anybody have a problem with, my one concern is that we've published this order, and I don't know if anyone's going to come speak to this later, but it's not that far off, so
Are we talking about, which item
talking
is
about
it?
6A, doing it,
Oh, 6A is the new course proposals?
new courses.
Yeah, I would think that they would be fine to move that ahead, yeah.
I mean, another option is taking
It's only
comment
10
now.
minutes on our agenda.
yeah, so why don't, can I, also, do we want to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I move that we approve the agenda with amendment that we move item 6A to the front of the action items.
We want you to go home and do your homework, Mr. Foster.
I know it's already done, so.
Okay, so 6A, do I have a second on that motion?
I second.
All the student
Aye.
Aye.
colleagues?
Aye.
Great, okay, wonderful. Okay, Superintendent, Dr. Austin.
Okay, I have a longer section in a minute when we get to the PAUSD promise, so I'll make this part short. I've enjoyed getting out and going to the PTA coffees. I had another one this morning at Juana Briones, and the best part about those visits are the opportunity to sit down with very small groups of parents and really spend some time. You know, those typically go hour and 20 minutes. And my presentation piece lasts about 5 minutes, and the rest are discussion topics all over. And it really helps me to understand what's important with our parents, and some themes are starting to shape up. So we'll continue doing those. My only other piece for today is Fletcher Middle School ran a pilot program on Saturday where they targeted invitations to students for extra assistance for a 4-week program that's on Saturdays. It's Saturday mornings at 8:30. And the first question I had when I was presented with this proposal was, who do you think is going to show up at 8:30 in the morning on a Saturday for extra school voluntarily? And apparently more than 40 students was the answer to that. The best part, in my opinion, besides the fact that we're just trying things, and that is a great part. But I showed up early and was just walking around, found a student wandering around about 8:15 or so. I said, so what brings you here today? And the student's answer, I need some extra help and they have it for me here. Done. Done. When I was able to meet with the teachers that were working on that day, I told them all with absolute guarantee that that Saturday program and that extra opportunity would be better than the program that they did not have in place last year. So I just love the call to action, and that we have people raising their hands and saying, yeah, I'm going to try something. I'm going to do something. I'm going to make myself available for extra opportunities. And I gave the same quick talk to our students that day, because each of them made a choice to get out of bed and get in there on that day with smiles on their faces. They were showing up happy. And it was the day immediately following a school dance that went to about 9:30, and they still made the effort to come in, some on buses. So I just see something really special happening here as far as people jumping in, students and staff alike, to try to make a difference. That's it.
Great, thank you. Student board members, Mr. Prabhakar?
Yeah, so today we had our annual TEDx speaker series. So the TEDx Club at Gunn hosted a bunch of speakers, professionals, teachers, and students. Some of the speakers were Peter Norvig, who spoke about artificial intelligence. We had some students speak about mental health, video games, anything that they wanted to. And then we also had some writers and other people speak about that as well, and some scientists and mental health professionals. We have the Summer Opportunities Fair tomorrow after school, so students who are looking for things to do during the summer can go check that out. We also have our 8th grade parent night, so 8th graders who are going to come to Gunn, their parents will have an opportunity to learn more about the school, learn more about classes, all of those things. We also have our spring club fair this Friday, so all of Gunn clubs will have a booth, and students can go around the quad to find new clubs to join. And we have some new clubs that will be presenting there for the first time. We also have the choir staff musical, where Gunn Choir runs a musical with staff members. That's going to start next Tuesday and go through that week as well as the next week.
Thanks. Ms. Freyer?
On. Okay. So we recently had some successful events at PAUSD. One of them is we had our SCO Globe quad concert with a lot of student performers, which was a huge success. And we showcased a lot of student art, which was a huge hit because there were a lot of talented people who got to showcase their work. We also held, Juggling Club held Game of Throws, their famous event, and they had 450 plus people sell out at the show, and it was amazing. They had jugglers from all over the globe come and perform, and it was a huge hit. And we also beat Gunn in basketball, which was pretty fun game, and we actually play them again February 12th if you guys want to come watch. We also had a Saratoga ASB come to observe our Pali ASB to learn about new events that we're doing this year and how we put them on and how we run things, just to collaborate on ideas. And then for upcoming events, we have a winter dance on February 9th, which is going to be held in the small gym. We also have our spring sports, which started this week, which is very exciting for a lot of students. We also had, starting this week, art in unusual places. So the art classes put up very cool projects around campus, and it's super interesting to look at. And we have our Valgrams being sold January 31st through February 8th. And we finally, have our library opening on February 8th as well. And AP Studio Art will showcase their art in there. That's all.
Thank you. Dr. Austin, Measure Z.
Yes.
They're not here yet. He did. Dr. Golden called him out.
Yeah, maybe you do your next.
Maybe we
can
go on.
switch?
Let's
switch.
bump up to our recap of the study session. We're just moving things all
That's what
around.
they get for walking out.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll come back to them.
Mr. Moore, would you like to bring this up? For tonight's purposes, this is a short item, just a quick update on something that's been, that's better. A quick update on something that's been, oh, now Bob walks back in. That's what you get. A quick update today on our PAUSD promise, our guiding document to take us into the future. After our first study session together on this topic, the staff went back and started working through revisions based on what we heard at that meeting. Those revisions and that work started about 45 minutes after that study session and have gone until about an hour before closed session started today. The board had very limited opportunity to see these last revisions, and we're not going through them all right now. This is just, it's an ongoing process. It is still a draft. It is still the same link, which is promise.pausd.org. But I do want to show you a couple of the places where we made revisions so that you can go back and review and take your time on it, provide more feedback. Derek, the blue section that you see, our first run at those statements missed the mark after hearing the feedback from the board. You'll see the newer statements are more concrete, more precise, more precisely aligned to the other sections, our priority goals, that all culminate in an effort to move the needle, which I'll get to in just a minute. Derek, can you just open up the teaching and learning? We combined now the elementary and secondary teaching and learning. After review of the comments we received, a couple things were pretty obvious to us. One, I believe that there was some perception that this section of the plan and others was turning into a laundry list, which was exactly the opposite of our intent. So we went back, streamlined the number of items that we had, combined, aligned them in order. So when you see a student from, that first TK experience all the way up to their post-secondary options, we wanted to put it in one place. The other thing that we heard is in the first version, you would have had a subtitle such as curriculum, and there would not have been a contextual statement underneath that. So we went back to add context, to add the global vision for each section, and then afterwards attach the key strategies. The last piece, just formatting wise, in our first iteration, we would have had something like high quality teaching and learning, and then it was broken up with pictures, no additional statement, no context, and key strategies, so it looked disjointed. We think that in retrospect, we created confusion and inadvertently placed action items next to things that could be seen as distractors. Next, I'd like to just go down to our moving the needle section, which is new. We had lots of feedback from the board on this topic. In fact, the term that was thrown around a lot at the table that day was we need to talk more about moving the needle. So we called this section moving the needle. We thought we'd just call it what it is. We further decided when we're looking at metrics, and we can expand metrics as the board desires, but we have an existing metric, which is the California State Dashboard. And it's probably a tool, a metric that has not received the attention it deserves. And it's clean. It covers not only test scores, but it covers the area of chronic absenteeism, which is a measurement of student engagement in schools, and student discipline is measured by suspensions, both things that the board wanted to see. The important part, and I know some people hate even hearing this pointed out, but I'm going to do it anyway. Earlier this week, the niche rankings came out again, and once again, Palo Alto is the #1 ranked school district in the state of California and moved up the list to be number 12 in the entire nation. There are a lot of school districts in the nation that wish they were Palo Alto. But part of the reason Palo Alto is and is going to remain and become even greater is that's not good enough. When we look at the top section of our dashboard, we're in the blue in just about everything. And the blue is the highest you can go. That is what you're shooting for. But we're going to call out and drill down and actually show our subgroup data, which is not only lagging, it is historically lagging. And while we're not going to become all about test scores, we are going to say if every indicator or every significant indicator that we've looked at for our HUR students, for our economically disadvantaged students, always seem to lag behind, let's start moving the needle on some of these things. Our thought is as we align services with these students and we look at the most public indicator we have, which is the dashboard, we would expect other indicators to follow. So we're calling it out piece by piece. This will be a metrics that will be very, very easy for us to benchmark against next year. One of the things we heard loud and clear when we were talking about metrics is to find things that are long lasting, not changing with the wind. These should be in place the state could make adjustments. But for some context, we have 17 areas that are orange or red, and we have an additional 8 that are in the yellow but are more than 2 places away from the blue, which still makes it an area where we have improvement, so a total of 25. We can determine later what we think is appropriate, but my immediate goal and benchmark would be that next year we will have less than 25 areas that we'll still be talking about in the same way. So it's a start. As said before, this is a draft. It is still a draft until it is no longer a draft. The reason we can continue to keep this web-based and not in a binder is because we see it as something that can be revised and improved upon throughout. Well, the metrics will probably be more long-standing. So I will stop there. We can take questions, but I want to reiterate, the board received this just a few hours ago. There was no expectation that you would have an opportunity to add a lot right at this point.
Thanks. Just, Ms. Payne Caswell, do you have any comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm psyched about this move the needle thing. What I really hope, and I've already actually emailed you about this, is some explicit connections from what we are doing to which needles we think are going to move as a result of it. If we're wrong, we're wrong, but at least let's point at something so that people understand, oh, all this work that I'm doing, our goal is for it to move this thing. Because I think it would be too dispersed if we say our goal is it will move all 25 things, because that probably won't happen. The other thing, I have had a lot of people surprisingly read our board packets. And so my request is that you actually in the item put this, put the link. Don't just say the promise, but actually put the link in here for those people who aren't here tonight.
Thanks. Mr. Collins? Nothing. Mr. Durup?
I think last time the board asked for more concrete goals, and I think the moving the needle section meets that, so I'm excited for it.
Mr. Dauber?
Well, I don't think we have more concrete goals yet. I think we have some metrics that I think we still need the goals part in terms of where we expect to be against these goals, at various points. But when do we expect to have this on the agenda next to look at substantive revisions?
I would expect the next agenda.
Okay,
Very likely the next 2.
great, thanks.
Okay. Ms. Furrier?
No comment.
Mr. Braga?
No comment either.
Okay. I was really happy to see what metrics we might be using. And yes, I guess the next step then is what are our benchmarks, right? Where we know where our baseline is. And the one thing that I discussed with you, and I haven't had a chance to talk to our chief academic officers about, is just making sure we understand as we put a focus on this. And I think somewhere in here it talks about using the SBAC interim assessments. And at least at the elementary level, there are a lot of assessments now, right? So one is something going to go because that comes in. And 2 is, I think we would really benefit for understanding how well, how much of a predictor are our formative assessments to the outcomes on the SBAC. If they are very predictive of our SBAC, then it sounds like we're doing exactly the right thing throughout the year. We're giving these assessments, it's guiding our instruction. They are very predictive, great. If they're not very predictive, then I would wonder, why? Which one is not really hitting the mark? Which one is better assessing? We have to do the SBAC, right? That's a state requirement. So it's not like we're going to get rid of that. But are we finding that one piece of data is more useful or more informative than the other? Hopefully we'll find that one is really predictive of the other. But I think that that's something I'm really interested in looking at as time goes on. Just making sure that we're using our classroom time as appropriately as we can, as efficiently.
Can I just, not for discussion right now, but to think about, we've spent a lot of time tracking the California Healthy Kids survey results, and that's not part of the dashboard, but it checks in on other things that we feel are important for our culture. So I hope you'll have a discussion about where we use that, how we use that.
So I'm going to take the mic back for a second then. I think what that makes me think of is, yes, we want these things to go up, but as much as we don't want to have 50 different goals, there are check metrics, right? Yes, we want these to go up, but there's lots of different things you check it against. And you don't want these to go up at the expense of a lot of other things. You want these to go up. And I think that we are predicting that when we continue to get better at lots of different areas, that will make these go up as well. But I agree with you that I think there are several other check metrics that we want to make sure we keep at the forefront that we're looking at along with this. Okay, great. Now can we go back and go to 4C, Measure Z?
We can. I'd like to bring Dr. Golden up to introduce our guest tonight. And before he does, I know Susan Usman is not able to join us. But I'd like to personally thank David Shin for all of his work, not only on this, the bond committee, but just in everything else he touches for our district. I really appreciate his advocacy and partnership. Dr. Golden.
Thank you. Well, first, you know I love our bond program. And
We've heard that.
I think the whole district does. The wonderful improvements and buildings we're creating for our wonderful students. Actually, I first saw Dave. I saw Dave on a Behind the Headlines podcast on Palo Alto Online.
Yes.
And he was talking
was
at that
the-
time.
that
This
was
was
the
April.
tracks,
And
right?
at that point, he had never dreamed he was going to be doing this. And so at any rate, he was talking about rail redesign. He was being interviewed. Dave was, we were moving along with our project list and our draft master plan. And on June the 19th, the board approved putting this on the ballot for November 6th. So there were, in fact, I was always counting the days. I was annoying the cabinet because I would give them a number, and the number would be 29 or 36. And at first they didn't know, but then oh yeah, that's the number of days to the election. So anyway, there were 140 days. I don't think that Dave realized how much work this was, because actually, if people knew how much work this was to be a chair or a co-chair, nobody would do it. It's just an incredible task. My job was to simply provide information, but his job was to work with the campaign and provide adequacy and also to promote the bond. I can remember good times, and I can remember I said there's going to be a lot of good news during this campaign, and then we're going to get not good news. And we did have some opposition, and Dave was incredibly good in working on these issues, and also working on the issue of campaign funding, because campaigns don't kind of run themselves. Dave wasn't alone. Susan, I'm so sorry Susan can't be here tonight, because generally whenever Dave was at a meeting, Susan was there also. Also, I wanted to acknowledge other people. Emily Jacquette, who was the treasurer, Baldwin Cheng, who did the website, Lynn Brown, who did fundraising, Jean Silva, lawn signs, Rachel Gibson, endorsements, Laura Stark, the phone bank, and then also two board members that, all 5 board members were incredible, but 2 were very heavily involved, and it was Melissa and Todd. And just thank you very much. We now have another bond. We have, what a gift to our students that Dave has facilitated. We have $460 million more, another strong schools bond, this one the 2018 version. And we commit, our whole staff commits to honor him and to honor the voters who voted for this, and do our absolute best to, again, create more wonderful facilities. So with that, yeah, and I will reiterate, maybe there should be a Move the Needle Award, and if there was one, then every year, and then I would nominate Dave this year for it. But it's too early because that's just in draft form, so whatever. But the fact remains, let me bring Dave up, and he'll talk for several hours, minutes, whatever. But Dave, you do have to say something.
Well, first, thank you, Bob, for that speech, because Susan emailed me her speech, and I don't have to read it anymore. He pretty much covered it all. Yeah, I just want to say it was a pleasure to work on it, speaking for Susan and me both. It was definitely something we had no idea what we were getting into, and yeah, I'm not sure I would do it again, but it's still fun in the middle of that. It was actually a crack team we work with. That's what I enjoy most with a lot of these projects, is just working with really great people, great motivated, smart people that are willing to just do it all. And Bob had named a whole bunch of, there's so many people that we couldn't be able to thank in any reasonable amount of time tonight. But at least we got a lot of the leaders in there. But, the whole community came together, a lot of people across Palo Alto, a lot of people in this room here. So very thankful for that. Also, I just want to do a special thanks to Dr. Austin over there, who on any text that we would send him, he would be there at that meeting that night. It was amazing to see him do that. So we're very thankful for that as well. Yeah, and that's it. Well,
wait, you need your certificate, and also Dr. Austin has a gift. But I do want to mention Don as well, because I would be going to these meetings, and inevitably, he would be there. I'd say, what are you doing here? But he was here. And so the certificate reads, this certificate is presented to Dave Chen in recognition of your tireless and incredible efforts on behalf of students and the community for the successful passage of the Measure Z Strong Schools Bond 2018. Dave, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Don.
That's the Move the Needle orchid.
Yeah.
I'll pass it on to the next person.
On behalf of the, right, yeah. On behalf of the board, I just want to thank you. We are all so grateful. I don't know if.
I want to say something, and particularly since Susan's not here tonight, and makes me sad that she's not here to stand up with Dave. I think the two of them were willing to stand up and do this job, but they had no idea what it was going to entail. And they basically spent, 6 months? Close to 6 months having no personal time at all and having to be at meetings constantly. And they did this for free. And so did the whole committee. And I appreciate that. We really, really want to thank the community for voting for this. As a result of this bond, we're going to be able to continue a building program that's very important to the community. But I want to particularly thank the chairs, because even when it became clear that it was going to take up all of their time, they still were very positive and kept us going. So thank you.
What she said, basically. Really, and again, thank you to the whole community for voting for it. We appreciate all the work you put in. Thank you. Okay, we're skipping ahead to 6A, our new course proposals. Why don't we go to Sophie?
All right.
Do this after.
Good evening. So tonight you are presented in your board packets with 7 course proposals from the secondary schools across the district. These courses fall within a mix of disciplines and are intended to meet student interests while also rounding out course offerings. Should these courses be approved, each will be offered in the course catalog for their site. If signups are not robust enough, it's important for you to know that the courses will not run. So just because they're being presented here this evening for your approval doesn't mean that you will see kids in them next year. It's based on their enrollment and their interest. We have had some questions about how new courses are evaluated, and as a result, each course offering will be assessed by the department through an implementation evaluation. This evaluation will be incorporated into the new course proposal process moving forward. And I will read to you a brief description of each of the 7 courses. So our first course is current events at the middle school level. This elective will focus on world, national, and local issues that impact our everyday lives. By studying current events and discussing them in a well-planned, safe classroom environment, students learn to be more engaged with society and open their own views to broader perspectives. As the Facing History website states, engaging students with current events is a crucial part of their development as informed and humane citizens in our democracy. This course has no designated curriculum at this moment because of the nature of the course. And based on feedback, we're looking into a process for monitoring the sources used and to ensure that they are fair and balanced. Tenor and bass choir. This choir course will provide students with low voices in the tenor and bass range an opportunity to further develop their musicianship. Medical interventions. There's a proposal for both college prep and honors pathways for this class. And they will utilize Project Lead the Way. These two courses are designed to follow the life of a fictional family as they investigate how to prevent, diagnose, and treat disease. Students will explore how to detect and fight infection, screen and evaluate the code in human DNA, evaluate cancer treatment options, and prevail when organs begin to fail. The differentiation between the different course levels is in the assessment and evaluation aspects of the course. Another Project Lead the Way inspired course called Human Body Systems is also presented to you. In this course, students will examine the interactions of human body systems as they explore identity, power, movement, protection, and homeostasis. Students will take on the roles of biomedical professionals to solve real-world medical cases. AP Human Geography. This course introduces students to systematic study of patterns and processes that have shaped human understanding, use, and alteration of the Earth's surface. Students will employ spatial concepts and landscape analysis to examine socioeconomic organizations and its environmental consequences. They will also learn about methods and tools geographers use in their research and applications. And finally, audio and music production. This class will focus on the aesthetic qualities of sound production and will analyze the impact of digital audio technology as an inherent form of communication in today's society. And I'll leave it at that. So students are very excited, staff are very excited about the possibility of these offerings, and that's it.
Great, thank you. We've got one card about this topic. David Foster? You have 3 minutes. I think you know.
Won't need all that. Thank you very much, by the way, for helping me out with this. I really appreciate it. My name is David Foster. I am the senior class president at Pali. I was very happy when Caroline brought this up to ASB. We learned about this, and I think this is awesome. I think all those courses sound amazing. I just want to mention, Pali at the moment does not have any history electives. So after I finished AP US History or US History junior year, no more history classes are available. We have a lot of great social science classes, but no history. And I think it's important that for students like myself who are more interested in the humanities to be able to have those options. You mentioned like rounding out course offerings. I think what would be very beneficial is if the board could look at offering more history courses to students at Pali and at Gunn, although this, I think, is more of a Pali issue at the moment. But I just want to bring that up, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Colleagues, Mr. Collins, thoughts?
Thank you for that brief and to the point presentation, which I thought was helpful, and the materials were very helpful. So I appreciate all of that. These all look, like Mr. Foster said, these courses all look great. I couldn't believe that one about the fictional family. It sounded like a combination of SimCity plus an episode of House. I mean, it's like there were no courses like that when I was in school, that's for sure. So yeah, I'm very supportive. I think it's important to recognize the source of courses is almost always the enthusiasm of our faculty who find their passion in bringing new instructional opportunities, new subjects, new ways of teaching, new material to our students. And in my mind, that's the core of a lot of what good education is. It starts with faculty, teachers who, deeply care about, who have a passion for bringing knowledge to the students. And in my mind, it's funny because we often hear about, if you have parents approach and say, oh, why don't we have courses on this, or what, we should upgrade that. And to which my response is almost always, gosh, that's a great idea if there are teachers who are excited about doing that. Because if they're not, then it's going to be a struggle. If they are, I mean, and all of us have had our lives touched by teachers who had a passion for an area, and it wasn't necessarily the area that we had our passion for, but their passion is almost always contagious. And I think that's one of the reasons I really like this event on our calendar, because you see the source of that. The one question, and you mentioned it, Ms. Ofek, and we had talked about it before, is on the current events course. The board obviously has a responsibility for improving curriculum and instructional materials, and kind of challenging with a current events curriculum, because by definition, if we approve it in advance, it's not going to be current events. So there's a challenge with a course like that. And I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge, but I do think it's a challenge that we should address. I don't think the board, I don't feel the board can discharge its responsibilities by saying, sure, we trust you, or yeah, that set of websites plus whatever other websites come up during the year, those seem like good ones. I think it would be better if there was a way for the administration to continuously monitor or periodically monitor, not just the first year, but every year, what was going on in that class. So in the event that, and as I said to you, 10 years from now, I think this class is going to be a big hit. So 10 years from now, when all of us hopefully are retired, and other wonderful people are teaching other wonderful students, that, we don't kind of go off the reservation and start using sources that are inappropriate and that the board never would have approved had they known, or the administration never would have approved had they known. So I think it's, as long as we have a mechanism like that, I'll be comfortable. But I don't want to abdicate our responsibility to review and approve curriculum and instructional materials. But thank you again for bringing forward such wonderful courses.
Mr. Darrow.
I'll echo what Mr. Foster said, that these courses are awesome. And also what Mr. Collins said about making sure that we have curriculum in place. But that being said, the current events course, I think, is fascinating to me, because a lot of educators that I've talked to have kind of lamented that societal developments tend to move so much faster than curriculum developments, and especially in the area of not just the current events part, but media bias, which is such a huge issue when it comes to how we're educating our students on civics, which is one of our responsibilities. So I'm very excited to see that part, something I think is much needed, especially now, and I'm very excited for these courses.
Mr. Dauber.
No comments.
Ms. Bain Caswell.
I have a lot of comments. This is like one of my favorite times when people bring new courses forward. Let me start with, it's great that we have teachers who are excited enough about their craft that they're coming up with new ideas on a regular basis and bringing them forward. That doesn't happen everywhere. We just expect it to happen here, but that doesn't happen everywhere. And that's really great. And it also is exciting when we don't all the courses that come forward aren't in the same area. So that to me is very exciting. I have some questions. The first question is around how many years have I heard from, particularly from PAUSD students, that they'd like to see some history electives. And I know we have to have excited excited teachers in order for that to happen. Is there a way to get that excitement go? I mean, our principal at Pali, who just walked in the door, happens to be a history teacher. I'm thinking maybe he is somebody who can help get the fire burning there around history electives. We certainly have social studies electives, but I think there are a lot of students, I've heard this over and over again, how they'd like to see more. This AP Human Geography class, if it's successful at Gunn, do we expect that it will roll over to Pali?
Oftentimes, that's exactly what happens. So we start somewhere and it plants a seed and it gets developed and it spreads.
Okay, so I think that could be an exciting place. On the current event class, I would like to agree with Mr. Collins. I want to make sure that we are, particularly if this is a popular class, and particularly if a lot of teachers then want to teach it, I think it's our responsibility to make sure we have some systematic way to make sure that we're monitoring what we're teaching, we're making sure that there's balance. It's easy to get excited about your own personal interests in current events, but we need to make sure that we're providing a balanced view. And in this world of fake news, I think one of the most important things we need to do is make sure that our students really know how to curate information properly. So I'm hoping that that would all be part of whatever system your team can come up with. I have a question about the tenor and bass choir. Being a choir groupie myself, I've always, I'm sorry, tenor and bass choir. Being a choir groupie, I've always enjoyed that Michael Nahar has this Tuesday men's choir that practices at lunch. And is this instead of that, or is he going to get rid of that in order to have this class?
I don't know that we have an answer to that question at this time because we don't know if there's interest in this course in order to be able to run it. So I can come back to you with the outcome of this course, but I can't answer that right now.
I would hope that if this course has enough students to run it, Michael Nahar will still run his Tuesday men's choir because I think it pulls in students that would never think to sign up. I noticed that the AP Human Geography class is listed only for 12th graders. Is there some reason for that? Because there's no prerequisites.
I think that they're working on trying to create opportunities of choice for the fourth year of social studies at Gunn. So I think that they're starting with the seniors. You have to, the whole AP process to complete the application, and the course is based on historical knowledge and content from the other courses. So I think at some point they might open it up, but they want to start with their senior year.
Okay, because when I looked at it and I went on the website for it, it didn't seem like you needed 9th, 10th, and 11th grade history. I particularly thought that it might be of interest to 11th graders. So I'm wondering if that question could be asked.
I can ask them.
Okay. And are there any
With me.
classes we're not going to do as a result? If we went forward with all of these classes, are there any classes we're not going to do next year?
I don't have an answer for that because we don't have student registrations or signups yet. So it depends on what students are interested in.
I'm asking a different question. You know what I'm asking.
I know exactly what you're asking. Students will vote with their feet, something we used to say. They'll sign up for the classes that have the highest interest, and since we are not getting new students, I would not expect additional staffing. So some things could drop off, and students will tell us which courses are the ones that still have high interest levels.
So we don't have any plans, though, to not teach certain classes other than students' feet on the street?
Student interest, that's
Correct.
accurate.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think those were most of my questions. It would be good for the next, when we vote on this, if you could just come back and let us know what your system will be to, for the current events class.
Ms. Furr.
Okay, I have a couple things. The first one is about the history electives. Thanks, David, for bringing that up. I also just want to point out that David was amazing and put together a survey when he worked with teachers on this topic, and he got nearly 400 students responding that they have interest in a potential history elective. So that's just a good metric to know how many students at Pali would really want to take these courses, and I 100% agree with Ms. Baton-Caswell that you guys should consider it. In terms of the AP Geography course, I also was wondering about the 11th grader possibility because I think a lot of 11th graders at Pali would be interested in that because they would jump on the opportunity to take an elective, especially 11th graders. So I'm in favor of that. And then I also agree with David on all of these courses being amazing and so awesome. And I particularly really like the current events course because I think regardless of the source being provided for these students, it teaches them to be critical thinkers no matter what they're given. And I think that's extremely valuable in our day today. Staying informed is one thing, but forming your own opinion is another. And I think that's the basis of this course right from the beginning. So I know why we're concerned about who's teaching and the sources provided, but I think we should remember that the basis is for the students to think critically, and that's why we should support it.
Yeah, I'm also a huge fan of all these courses. Like Caroline and David said, I think social studies and humanities in general are just a place where we can get a lot more courses in. Last year, a lot of gun students came to board meetings and talked about how they want more humanities courses, how they want more social studies courses. I think AP Human Geography is definitely something that can get a lot of interest. I do agree that it could possibly benefit 11th graders because they would be taking AP US History at the same time. So it's possible they could take this course that's more of talking about geography, spatial knowledge of the entire world, and cultures, things like that. I think that overall this can start a trend of definitely more electives. And I think in regards to current event course, media bias is something that I think should be taught a lot more in classrooms. It's a valuable skill when you look at any source to know if it's biased, is it something that's reputable? It definitely comes up a lot in other classes, and I think starting this in middle school is a great idea. And like Caroline said, I think this course should definitely be something that we go ahead with. And while there are risks that text could be biased, things could be taught in a biased way, I think to some extent that applies to a lot of other courses as well. I think in this case, if we teach kids the skills to know what a biased source is and what isn't, that's a lot more valuable and something that can definitely not only be applied to this course, but taken to other history classes even beyond, where they can look at any source, any news article, and figure out, is this something that's reputable? Is this something that I can use as an academic source? Things like that. And I think, yeah, starting this off in middle school is great.
Thank you, guys. You sort of stole my thoughts there on the civics course. That was excellent. I'll get to that one last. I'm really excited to see all of these courses. I really like do we call them blended courses? The course that there's an H option within the course. Fantastic. It sort of minimizes lane changes and whatnot and gives students a chance to really challenge themselves if they want to go for the extra work of doing the research for the H credit. I love to see those classes together. I'd like to see that they weren't all science-focused courses, and yet that was I was reminded last spring, I think, or maybe when we were doing this last year, when a whole host of gun students came and said, please, please more. So again, when they come from teachers, that's the best case scenario, but if we have any way that we can encourage that or make a pipeline for it, there's clearly I can't believe 400 students expressed an interest. That's wonderful. So the last thing is the civics course. I was so excited when I saw this. I think is very relevant today, as Mr. Drott mentioned, just in this age of media bias and whatnot, and being able to tell what is, I mean, everything has bias, right? But what are the biases behind them, and what are they based in? The description of the course makes me say, okay, like, first of all, I don't think that we're going to be able to determine all of the sources that you come from, because the kids are going to go home and they're going to go online and they're going to find primary sources and opinion pieces and whatnot. So they're going to come in with all kinds of pieces. So we can't necessarily control what sources. This isn't the kind of course where you're transmitting information to them. You're getting conversations going. So they're going to come with what they're going to come with. But I think the critical part of this course is in these descriptions about discussing, debating, thinking about current events, creating your own pieces of media, looking at primary source and opinion pieces. So much, especially learn the skills to critically analyze news sources and understand how cultural, national, religious, and political experiences affect personal beliefs. Like, if we do this, if every middle schooler in America does this, we've got a different nation. So this is wonderful. Of course, I it's important to have oversight on every class that we teach. But I am not worried about what news sources they get from here, because students are going to go find them. And the critical work is going to take place in the classroom when conversations are happening about, wow, this piece is saying something very different than that piece. Are these opinion pieces? Are these research pieces? What are the bias? Are the facts correct? And it's how you start to become a more advanced consumer of media. So I'm really excited about these, especially this one, and I've got no concerns or questions. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Yep.
Can you take us through how we go about getting UC accreditation for our courses and what the path is here for the courses that are listed?
So this set of courses will,
Obviously not the middle school class, we don't.
right, but the courses that are proposed here, should they get approved, then the teachers will flesh them out even more and submit them to the UC portal for approval. And there's a long window of opportunity for doing that. It opens in February and closes in September. So there are there's actually 3 timeframes for which you can provide revisions should the UC system request additional information. And then it's either UC approved or not.
So we could run a class, for example, the medical interventions class, we could get approval for it, and we may get approval for the honors, but we might not get approval for the honors.
It's possible. I
And
think
we
we
would
would
still run
not, we would have to communicate that to our students, but with the February 1st window, we submit it ready to go on February 1st, and then they respond to us, and we will know before we start next school year whether or not it's been approved or not.
But we could have it approved and just not have the honors part and still want to run it, right?
Well, if we don't have I mean, I think your question is around whether or not we get honors.
Well, that's my last question here was just if we had it, if it was approved as a class, but it wasn't approved as an honors class, would we still
They're
run 2
submitted
different
as
classes?
2 separate classes, right?
Right, I know. So
yeah.
would we still run the honors class if it wasn't approved as UC honors, but we still had a different, more advanced curriculum than the
I would have
regular
to
ones?
consult with the administration at the sites to talk, I mean, it would be Pally in this case. We do have classes that have honors in the title that are not honors in UC. And we're, as you know, continuing to work on looking into how to fix those things. It's more complicated because those courses are much older courses. So we can get back to you around what happens there. It's not happened, so I don't anticipate that happening, and we have not had that happen in the last 3 years. So I don't know what we would do in this particular case, and nor do I anticipate that happening in this case either. The distinction between honors and college prep courses is pretty clear in UC, and we can develop, it's all in the, as I said, in the assessments of the course.
And I'm just bringing it up, and you and I talked about this earlier. You know, we had sort of a history of chem honors and regular chem, and the chem honors didn't have UC approval. Now I believe it does as an honors class.
Right. So there's a longstanding history there in that course, and I don't think we should go into that this evening, but that has been rectified anyway. We resubmitted the course, and it has honors credit at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. We do have one more comment card, so can I call up Axel? Coming up to the mic, you've got 3 minutes. Yes.
Hi, my name is Axel. I'm a political science student currently at Stanford, and I just wanted to comment very quickly on the proposal for the civics course. It's something that I'm personally very passionate about, civics education, and it's a fantastic thing that we're doing this here at the district. Just a couple quick suggestions, take them or leave them, it's all right. It seems to me like the board does want to have an input on how on the content of the course, and it seems like I mean, of course, it's important to let the teacher teach what they want and to adapt to the circumstances. But also, there's a desire to teach media literacy. There's a desire to teach how to process primary sources. So maybe the first few weeks of the course could be set aside for teaching that. And I think that a very important thing, and this is the thing that I do want to talk about, might be to expand that just a little bit to talking about like information overload. That's a huge thing in our society today, where we're dealing with a lot of information that's being thrown at us through social media, through the news, and it's a huge source of stress that even people my age, I'm 21, just like about to graduate college, we haven't really figured out how to deal with yet. And there aren't that many resources to help us. So things like, for example, desaturating our iPhone or turning off notifications for news apps, or implementing a way that we can just silence our phone and turn the world off for just a little bit while we do work. That would be incredibly helpful, I believe. And it's part of how we, the students, engage with the world. So just food for thought. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Colleagues, do I have a motion to bring this back on consent at the next meeting?
I had just asked for a little more information. So if it was in the consent package, and then we could decide if we still had questions on it.
Okay.
Can we do that
Right, we
way?
can always pull it from consent.
Right, but
if you still have the
I'm
questions.
expecting that we wouldn't get exactly the same package. Next time we'll have a little bit more that just gives some guidance on what kind of system, not all the details, just sort of what kind of system you anticipate.
Okay, do I have a second? Or, I don't know if
I don't recall a practice where we've voted whether to put something on consent. I think it's up to the agenda setting committee whether to do that. So,
yeah, trying to get a sense.
okay, I just don't want to create a,
Usually we
I
just
don't want to
say,
create
yeah.
more process than we already have.
Okay, well, I am asking if I have a motion to bring this back on consent, so I get a sense.
Fine with me. Yes, I so moved.
I second.
Great. All those in favor? Students?
I guess we're voting.
We're voting. We're voting on it now. Go ahead.
Aye.
Yes?
Sure.
Great. Okay, just wanted to see. Thanks. Yeah, sure is good. Sure is good enough. Great. Okay, so now we're going back to number 5, to action items 5, and we're going to start with 5A, the Grant Avenue staff housing. Dr. Austin.
Okay. We had this item before you previously. The only real change, there are 2 places that are changes. The recommendation itself is we're asking that the board direct staff to conduct an interest survey regarding the PAUSD staff housing in general and identify potential non-operational funds available for the proposed project at 231 Grant Avenue. We think that captures both of the concerns or things that we heard at the last meeting. One being, do we have an interest? A survey will certainly tell us that. Chris Kohler is ready to move forward with a survey very similar to the survey recently conducted at Jefferson Union. It was actually a nicely constructed survey that will give us some good information on the back end. And Dr. Novak is more than ready to start looking for sources of funding that may be appropriate that are non-operational ongoing funds. That is all we need for tonight. And I would not expect to bring this back to you further until the conditions on the bottom are met, which is that we would have the survey done. We would further research the experience of other districts, which we've actually already been doing a little bit loosely, that we would request some form of a resolution or support statement from our associations, and that we would have detailed responses for the logistics questions, including a completed proposed contract. So this would be the only statement between now and something that probably would not occur for some time. This would not be an immediate next step. So I will stop.
Great, thanks. I don't think we have any cards on this, so Mr. Dauber, do you have any comments or questions?
So what I understood maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that what Supervisor Simidian is seeking is an expression of interest from the district, and that the next step would be to make that expression, not to enter into a binding contract on a project. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, because that's not completely clear from the item. It sounds, what the item mentions as a next step is prior to requesting action requiring a commitment of funds for a binding contract. Is that, there's another intermediate step, right, that we would get to well before we would get to the point of committing funds?
So there absolutely is. So what we're looking forward in the recommendation, we see this, and we've been in contact with Supervisor Simidian's office. This would be our expression of interest, but that's as far as it goes. There's nothing binding beyond that. So the actual recommendation is the intended action or the recommended action for tonight. The bottom is, and if it's not clear, I apologize. It is before we would bring back an actual contract of any sort, we would have additional work to do.
Okay, so this action tonight is intended to be that expression of interest.
Absolutely.
I see. Okay, that's what wasn't clear to me.
Absolutely, yes.
It's just, if you look at the recommendation, it's not, we're not signing it, we're not approving a contract or whatnot. We're just recommending that staff conduct an interest survey, and that Dr. Novak identify funds. So, and we're just sort of directing staff to do that. I don't even think this is going to take a vote on our part. I think we're going to see if there's any objections to us going ahead with those two things as we go around. But this is somewhat what we did last week. It was just the first time we saw it. And it didn't include the interest, the part of the interest survey.
It's under action items,
I
but
know.
it's listed as discussion.
Yes.
So which
I
is
noted
it?
that. Well, it's under action items. But yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, we're directing staff, but actually what Mr. Collins and I were just talking about was whether or not we actually, this is actually a vote. So I guess we can vote to direct the staff, but we're not signing into a contract, it's not signing a contract or anything at this point. It's really just asking the staff to take the next steps.
I see. So for me, the identification of other options for supporting employee housing is really critical, because I think it would be a big mistake, I think, to sort of take on the obligation for and the mission of providing employee housing, but to do it in the form of a dozen units with no clear understanding about what the next step might be, because we'd sort of be in the worst of all possible worlds. I think we would have raised expectations on the part of employees with no clear understanding about how or whether we could actually meet that, and we'd have created a very small set of lucky winners and a lot of employees who would reasonably ask, well, what's the next step? A lottery ticket is not an employee benefit that I think we want to be providing. So I really want to see this in the context of some larger set of options, and I won't support moving beyond the expression of interest if we don't have a clear path. I think that's just a minimum criterion. I'm supportive of the expression of interest, but the direction here does not actually include what I think is the most critical next step. I'm sure there's a lot of employee interest in the benefit, but what I'm really interested in is having staff bring back a concrete set of next steps beyond this, so that we can evaluate whether this is sort of a one-off or whether it really is part of a program that we can pursue. I'm also interested in, and I can make a motion to add this if everybody would prefer. I'm also interested in some assessment about what the level of need is and whether this, how this fits into our overall compensation strategy for staff. We're providing a very substantial potential employee compensation benefit it's certainly a thing of value to employees. We're doing it outside the context of collective bargaining, and we're doing it outside the context of a real analysis of need, and that also makes me uncomfortable. So, I want to I want to have a clear understanding about what the need is. I want to understand how it fits into our compensation strategy, and I want to understand what, how it fits into a strategy for actually making good on all of that.
You want to talk? Wait,
Well, it's an expression of interest. Yes, that's a part of it.
let's see if Dr. Austin has a.
What
response.
are our employees' actual housing expenses? Where do they live? We have a lot of speculation about it. We don't have a lot of facts about it.
Hence the survey.
Well, can I
Wait, no, let's
just ask a
let
quick
Dr.
question
Austin
about that?
answer. Let's
Well,
let Dr.
no,
Austin.
before he answers it,
Dr. Austin, do you have a response for Mr. Dauber?
I have a quick response.
Yes.
Tonight, personally, I see as low stakes. It's low stakes because there's nothing binding, there's nothing even to read through and consider. And I think even Supervisor Simidian he's conceded that there are a lot of questions. The 600,000 number could fluctuate. There are a lot of unknowns. The either subtle or not so subtle piece included here is that survey piece. Partly because I think there are a lot of assumptions about the need for housing on both ends of it. And the survey is a really critical piece of forming a plan. One thing, without getting too off here, is even the latest Coverly iteration had a placeholder for staff housing. So that's not an unknown option. So I think this is exploration, I think a more formal exploration of one potential way of attacking this, if it's something that we ever really get into this idea of staff housing. So but I do think tonight is, in the grand scheme of things, low stakes for us.
Is that it, Mr. Dauber?
Yeah, so I guess I'm happy to reduce all of that to a motion to direct staff, if that would be useful.
Why don't you do that right
Okay.
now, and then we'll go around and make comments about it.
I have a
Well,
question.
so
Okay, I'll wait till.
We'll open up that. Do you have a motion?
Sure. I move that the board direct staff to conduct an interest survey regarding staff housing to identify potential non-operational funds as set forth here, to conduct this comprehensive interest survey of employees, to further research the experiences of school districts and bring the board an analysis of options for providing employee housing, and finally to provide a discussion of how staff sees this fitting into our overall compensation approach and collective bargaining.
Second.
Wow. Okay, we are now. I think I got it all, so I'm happy to read it back to you. Ms. Peyton-Caswell, take it away.
Okay. I can't imagine that anybody on our staff, when a survey comes to them, isn't going to say, oh yeah, I'd like some low-cost housing. So the questions need to be really carefully crafted. I remember a while back, we had some survey that went out, and we asked people if they were interested in world language in elementary school. And there was no trade-off. It was like, are you interested in it? Yeah, of course I'm interested in it. What are you willing to trade off is the real question. And so I haven't seen the Jefferson survey. I don't know if they have that. But I think for us, in order to use a survey like that in a helpful way, we need to understand how important is that? What would people be willing to trade off for that? I have some assumptions that there's a lot of interest, but if all we ask is the question, is there a lot of interest, I'll probably be right.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Collins.
I love the optimism that we allotted 5 minutes for this item.
There seem to be more questions today than there were last week.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the motion, and I'm going to vote for it. I think, like Dr. Austin says, this particular item is low stakes. I think expressing interest in a project like what, and where in Mr. Simidian, Supervisor Simidian's effort is kind of an IQ test. I mean, if you think you might be interested, you should vote yes. I mean, because it's costless to do so, and then we get an option to find out more. So we definitely want a free option to find out more. And I think, we can identify the funds. I imagine we already have. So
Did you say an IQ test?
yes, it's like an IQ test. It's like, if you say no, it must mean you have a low IQ.
Oh, that kind of.
That kind
I thought
of
it was
test.
some analogous, like,
No.
okay,
Um,
all right.
Sorry.
Low IQ.
That said, I think Mr. Dauber hit the nail on the head. I mean, staff housing is going to come at us big and fast. And this is not the main way it's going to come at us. It's going to come at us in the Coverly project. Anybody who's seen the maps, there is teacher housing identified in the Coverly housing, or staff housing identified in the Coverly plan. There are more than one options that are being tossed around for housing. It could be dozens of units, it could be hundreds of units. And we literally have no way to react to that at this point because we do not have any of the data necessary to do it. And I think all the things that are listed here and that Mr. Dauber added are necessary. I sent you some of my thoughts after the last meeting of, this is a big deal, not only because it involves money and land, but because, as we've talked before, we are not a district that is light on its feet. We do not take on large multi-year projects easily. And this is something that we'd be committing to for decades if we undertake it. So we really ought to be pretty confident that we know what problem we're trying to solve, why the proposed solutions solve it, what it costs, what our benefit is, how it fits into our compensation, and frankly, the long-term economics of the district. So I think there are a lot of meaty topics to dive into, but I think it's one we need to dive into because I think, we're in an extraordinary cost of living part of the world, and this is an option that other people have pursued, some with some apparent success. So, shame on us if we don't get going and figure it out. So I'm supportive of the motion, and I think this is a good way to move forward.
Mr. Dar.
I'm also very supportive of this, and I've publicly said so before, but I do think that there are any number of scenarios where a staff member would get the survey and say, no, I don't want teacher housing. I mean, how long is the term? Does it mean that if they leave in the middle of a school year, they have to pack up and go? Are there going to be community guidelines? Because now we have staff living in something owned by the district. So do we dictate how they should behave when they're out of school? And if so, do staff want their employer dictating how they live, much less where they live? So there are a whole slew of considerations I think we have to take into account, logistical concerns. And I could see people very easily saying, no, I don't want this situation. I want a subsidy. I don't want this. And so, alternatives and logistics are super important with this, especially because it is so necessary for so many people. But that being said, I am supportive of this low stakes move that we're making today.
Thank you. Mr. Prabhakar.
Yeah, I generally support the motion, but I also agree with those concerns. I think one of the main things we have to decide is what info is communicated on the survey, because on our side, we don't have a lot of information. Like, for example, we don't know how many units are in this place. So I think there has to be a balance between communicating what we know, but also if there isn't a lot of info and you're a staff member and you see this survey offer for housing, you're not always going to say yes if there's a lot of information missing. So I think just figuring out that balance of giving the information we have while also making it sound appealing is important.
Thanks. Ms. Freyer?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Generally, I'm really supportive of this. I'm very glad that we have this in front of us. This is a low commitment right now in our obligation to the county, but it is an expression of interest. And I appreciate that it has also sort of helped kickstart us into this conversation and into this work. I support Mr. Dauber's amendment because I do think that when we get to the steps where we do either have to, fish or cut bait, that we have a broader picture of what the options are and how this fits into the overall compensation package. So I do agree that the way we ask the questions is going to make a big difference, weighting certain options against other options, maybe giving some context to it. Also, we were recently looking at the Cubberley plans, and there's a possibility housing will go there. Obviously, this is not going to be, this issue of housing is not going to be solved by one particular housing development or one, not, right. Likely not one solution, right? It's probably a multi-pronged solution. So I am very supportive of this motion with Mr. Dauber's amendment. If there are no other
I think he
comments. He moved and seconded.
He has the original motion. So it's not
We never, right, I was taking this as the original, so this is,
he incorporated
you incorporated this. So our motion, Vicky, do you have the wording of the motion? Would you like me to read aloud what I think I heard? I can just give it to you later. Okay, great. Okay, and we have a second of that, right? Okay, so just to make sure everyone up here at the dais knows what we're talking about, the recommendation includes the two points on the recommendation in the original bold, plus bringing the board an analysis of options, of housing options, and finally, and how staff sees this fitting into the overall compensation package.
I'd like to actually amend my motion because I think what tripped me up at the beginning is still a little peculiar, that I think the force of what we're actually doing tonight, in addition to giving this direction, is expressing interest. So I think we might as well actually vote on expressing interest, yes. So
that we're expressing interest.
Right, I'll move to amend my original motion by saying that the board expresses interest in the project at 231 Grant Avenue as proposed by, as described by Supervisor Simidian.
Second.
Okay. Student board members.
Aye.
Aye. On the amendment.
On the amendment. And colleagues on the amendment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay, so we've got this amendment of showing and expressing an interest in the 231 Grant Ave proposal to go along with Mr. Dauber's original proposal. So now all those in favor of the amended proposal, student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
Colleagues?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. I think both the original proposal and the amendment were proposed by Mr. Dauber and seconded by Mr. Collins, yes?
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Moving on, 6B, board bylaws. 5B, I skipped. Authorization to award contract for vendor delivery. I get the feeling I'm going to see Dr. Golden up here. Hi, Dr. Golden.
Hi. So, the board has previously approved bidding this contract. We've done it. We're proposing awarding it to Mobile Modular, which does the majority of modular classrooms in the district.
That's it? Okay.
That's
Really, 1 minute. Mr. Darrow.
I move that we approve the contract.
Second.
Any discussion? Great. Student board members?
Aye.
Aye.
Colleagues, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful.
Dr. Gold.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. Now we are moving on to 6B, Board Bylaw 9124. I would like to start with Comey. Yes, or unless,
Thank you. Board requested review of this policy by the Board Policy Review Committee on 2 occasions. So the BPRC actually discussed this policy back in December as well as in January. BPRC did not recommend any revisions or any changes to this policy, which is fully aligned with California Board School Association's policy. So it's exactly like the sample, and BPRC did not recommend any changes.
thank you. Okay, looks like we're starting with Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Can I just interrupt for a moment, because I want to make sure that everyone understands, because in here it says that we recommend that we adopt the attorney policy. We didn't make any changes in the policy, right?
No, we did not make any
Yeah,
changes.
so we actually are.
We're not adopting anything.
The BPRC's recommendation was not to make changes, so there would be no action required. We did want to bring it back.
As requested.
Because the board wanted the policy discussed. So that's why we're here.
So there are no minutes from the BPRC, so maybe what you guys can do first is tell us what the discussion was and how did you arrive at this?
I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Dauber, who is chair of the BPRC.
And I'll look to Ms. Comey and Mr. Durop for any additions. So The issue that that was raised during the board discussion of the sort of reaffirmation of the decision to hire a general counsel, and then when we actually went ahead and appointed Ms. Comey, the question was, should we modify the bylaw regarding communication between board members and the district council, and specifically that the bylaw currently says that only the board president can seek legal advice from the board's attorney directly unless the board explicitly provides otherwise, right? Which I think we've done in one case regarding Mr. Brienza when she wasn't the board president as part of the Stanford ad hoc committee. And so the question was, should we modify that now that we have an in-house general counsel? And so we discussed it at the BPRC. There was pros and cons discussed. The pros are the ones that I think were raised here when we discussed it at the board. There were cons around.
Say what they were.
The pros, and others may have a different memory of this, so I don't want to repeat all of that. But I think the pros were that it's, in a sense, it would be silly to have, I think from this perspective, it'd be silly to have a lawyer on the premises to whom the board members could easily direct questions to without incurring additional costs on the part of the district, and not take advantage of that and getting, opinions about, legal issues that are of concern to board members as they think about, the policy issues that, are coming before us. I think that was the main, that there's a real difference between the cost and other, sort of logistics around board members contacting an outside counsel directly versus an inside counsel. I think, and so that the board members that I heard wanted a discussion of, well, should we change the board bylaw to reflect that and make an exception for inside counsel? The BPRC, and I think that was raised at the BPRC, there was a sort of contrary issues expressed at the BPRC, and I'll try to remember, and we don't have minutes available right now, but I'll try to sort of remember the main ones. One issue was how to handle issues of privilege. Typically, the board receives advice from its legal counsel in closed session, and so it's really clear what constitutes privileged communication. And so board members are pretty clear about what not to divulge because it's protected by the confidentiality of closed session. So it raises the possibility of inadvertent breaches of privilege when board members don't get that information in closed session. There was, I think, also the confusion about potential confusion about who the attorney's client is. The client for the attorney for the district's counsel is the board collectively, not individual board members. And so the board should be the one, in this view, seeking and receiving legal advice, and the delegation of that responsibility to the board president makes sense. Doesn't, from that perspective, it's confusing for one board member to receive legal advice that other board members aren't aware of and didn't give. Then there's also a question about, representing that advice, in other contexts. Is it going to happen accurately? And there's also, I think, a question about, so we talked about, well, is it possible that we could draw a line between kind of the general counsel's sort of information on legal issues as opposed to legal advice? And we essentially decided that that was kind of a distinction without a difference, and that it was going to be hard to make that in practice, and sort of taxing to put that obligation on the general counsel to like figure out what the question, which side of the line that the question was on, and then to sort of police it in dealing with individual questioners. There may have been other issues on that. That's kind of, so then one final thing. So we aired these issues in an interesting session of the BPRC, and then we asked our general counsel to go and look to see how other districts had handled this that have general counsels, because, you know, guess what? They've maybe addressed the same issues. And maybe I'll just let you speak to what you found, actually, Ms. Yeah.
So 9 districts responded. 4 of them said they use the board president as the gatekeeper. The other 4 said that anyone has, any board member can receive legal advice. The 9th person said that they don't have a protocol, but what they do is they receive questions from anybody, but any response that they provide goes to all 5 board members. So because board is the client, so any work that they did, they would send it out to all board members and make it clear that it was a question that came from a board member, but here is my advice.
You said 4 one way, 4 the other way, and 1.
1 in the middle, San Diego in the middle, yes.
So faced with all that, we decided that there are some obvious pitfalls. The benefits aren't very clear. We could get ourselves into some sticky situations by opening this, along lines that I talked about. So we decided to recommend that we not change the bylaw and maintain the current practice. So that's a lot of background,
Well,
but
no,
there you
that
go.
helps. It's really hard when we get just nothing, just the policy and no like explanation of how we got here. So that's all good things to think about. I do think that our practice should always be that if one board member gets some information, that all 5 board members get that same information, whether it's legal information or other information. We used to have a protocol about that. We haven't touched our protocols in a long time, but I think that that's, since we could only take action as a board, and we only have any authority as a group, to have some members of the board have different information doesn't make sense. There is, if I look at this proposed, or the language that's in it right now, there's a paragraph under contacting legal counsel. It's the second paragraph, and it says, individual board members other than the board president may not seek advice from district legal counsel on matters of district business unless so authorized by the majority of the board. And so I guess I have to ask, why would the board president not be under the same protocol? Did you guys talk about that?
Yeah, because the board president is the spokesperson of the board per our board policies.
So, right, so wouldn't we have to authorize the board president to be getting legal on legal matters? Authorize them that that's something we want advice on? I mean, that was how, I was actually surprised when I read this, because I remember as board president, you didn't just go off and talk to the legal counsel. It wasn't just because it cost something. It was also because the board needed to tell you that that's something the board wanted to do.
There is another paragraph that says, at his or her discretion, the board president or superintendent may confer with district legal counsel subject to any limits or parameters established by the board. So whatever the president would be doing and talking to legal counsel would have to be within any parameters that we set forth.
So then it just seems odd that the second paragraph is other than the board president. Just seems odd to me. And this is not specific to you, Jennifer, or anybody. I just sort of,
Seems like it's the other way around.
The way my read of that paragraph is unless the board sets limits, the president can talk to the legal counsel about anything.
Right.
So in the absence of limits, so they don't contradict each other, they
Right.
complement each other.
Yeah.
So unless we passed limits, it opens the door that we could pass limits,
Absolutely.
either global limits or local limits on particular issues if we wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't consider what you're asking really is whether we should restrict the bylaw further regarding contact, whereas the question that we took up was, should we expand it to include all board members?
Well, you know, I was just thinking through. I mean, part of what we talked about was we wanted to make our legal counsel report to the board as a whole, not the board president, but the board as a whole. And that was our whole discussion. And so then if that's going to be the case, then the authority of the board as a whole, rather than the authority of the president, should be represented in how we're working with our district legal counsel.
I mean, I guess I'd say a couple of things. Having served as the board president, I know you have as well. There are points at which it's convenient for the board president to seek some legal advice. For example, we did it. You know, we've done it. I think Ms. Godfrey did when we were talking about the OCR resolution. When we've dealt with various personnel issues, to get information to then communicate to the board, say in closed session, when there's a legal issue involved that the board is discussing. So there's a sort of convenience, I think, so that somebody on the board can do that without the board having to give direction in order to do that. I think also just the board sometimes has a kind of institutional interest in getting legal advice, that it's hard to actually, it's hard for us to meet and decide to do something. So it's a way for us for the president to kind of act in the board's interests. It's not, I don't think there's ever been a case that I have seen where the board president actually gave direction for the lawyer to do something, other than answer a question, right? Like, the board president isn't going to be initiating legal action or anything like that.
Yeah, it just says confer here. There's no.
Right. There's no.
Seek advice and confer.
There's no authority to actually do anything. So
Let me ask just.
I mean, I'm just speculating about why we have this bylaw, but.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure that what we've created here is going to work in our business. So today I had a random question, so that had a legal part to it. I thought, oh, I'll just pick up the phone and call Comey, and then it's like I probably shouldn't do that. So I let the superintendent and the board president know. I also let Comey know in an email to the superintendent that I was asking this question, but they were both on that email. I'm not sure how we talked to her. That felt like overkill. What I did today felt like overkill for a very simple question. Is that how we want to operate?
I think the way it's written now, I think you did exactly the right thing. You brought it to me, I posed the question, and I would sort of expect, it's a somewhat small question, but it was related to our agenda here, that I expect it would be in our Friday update from our general counsel. If it's something that was important that we know tonight before the meeting, then it might be something that during this item, we asked her to report out.
Okay, so is that how we want to operate? That if we have a question of Comey, we go through the board president or the superintendent? I mean, I'm okay, I just want to be consistent.
Yeah.
Like every other topic.
Yeah, that's how we currently operate with outside counsel. I guess the only other issue there is the Brown Act, so I think there are some questions probably that should only be put to the superintendent.
Yeah.
Because the board president,
Might be.
there's nothing here that sort of exempts those communications from the Brown Act.
Okay. So then we're going through the superintendent like we would do for a non-legal topic if I wanted to ask about HR.
And then we all get the information at the end of the week, presumably.
Okay, well, I guess we have to be careful about hallway conversations because we have hallway conversations with different members of staff.
Not me.
Yes, you do.
I'm almost never in the hallway. I mean, literally.
I know you do.
He doesn't have hallway
I
conversations.
hardly ever come here.
Might not be in person. Okay, all
But
right.
I think that's most important about our general counsel, right? We want to be aware of how much time we're taking up or questions we're asking without that information also going to the rest of the staff, rest of the board with any staff member, but specifically with our general counsel. We've got a board bylaw about this. Sort of rises to a different level, I think, than the rest of the staff.
Is everybody okay with this?
I guess
Well, why
we'll
don't we,
find out when
we're
we vote on the bylaw.
going to do let's do a go
Well, no,
around
no, I
here.
mean, we're having a conversation. Somebody can make a motion to.
I mean, I'm okay with
Well,
it because that's what we decided.
We
when
don't,
went to the
you know,
BPRC. I don't know, Mr.
we
DeRock
don't,
has changed his mind or
we
not.
don't actually have to make a motion because I think
Why don't we
that
go around it?
BPRC is proposing that we don't make any changes, we keep it the way it is. So we were starting comments here with Ms. Peyton Caswell. Mr. Collins, do you have any comments or questions or thoughts?
We're making a mountain out of a molehill here. I mean, I think it would be fine either way, therefore it's fine the way we delegated it to BPRC, they came up with a proposal, it's fine. Well, I'm sure it'll work fine.
Mr. Rupp?
It would have fine, I think it would work fine the other way too, but this is the way BPRC called it, so let's go with it.
I do just want to give a little bit more context to Ms. Bain Caswell. And I think that it would only be fine this way, and that's my interpretation. And the reason is because the outer bounds of how an attorney-client relationship operates with an organization is set by the rules of professional conduct, which are the ethical rules that the state bar enacts. So for those of you keeping track, it's Rule 1.13, formerly 3-600, which governs the organizational clients. And it's pretty clear in that the attorney is the attorney of the organization as a whole or through its designated representative. And based on our own board policies, the designated representative is either the president or the superintendent. So within those two sort of frameworks, the only way it could work is if either the board as a whole in a meeting directed Ms. Vishakan to do something or ask for legal advice, or if independently at her discretion, Ms. DiBrienza did, or of course, Dr. Austin. It isn't something that, at least in my interpretation, the board really has the ability to expand because the outer bounds, again, are set basically by what Ms. Vishakan is allowed to do under her licensing requirements.
I guess those 4 other districts are in deep trouble.
Well, and so my thinking on that is they may have a different relationship between how their board members discuss issues on behalf of the board, or they may just be not compliant. Either way, I think it's better to err on the side of caution for us and our new general counsel.
Mr. Dauber, anything else?
No, I appreciate Mr. Collins' principle of deference to the BPRC. That's all.
Mr. Prabhakar, anything to add? Nothing to add. Ms. Freer? Okay, I don't have anything to add. I think I was in the last BPRC meeting, which was the first time we discussed this, and all of this reasoning made a lot of sense to me. I initially, when we first hired Ms. Vishakan, I thought, great, now everyone can talk to her. And then in just having a few simple conversations, we said, oh, wow, this is a lot more complicated than that. At least I came to that realization. So this seems right to me. And I don't think we have any action we need to take on it because, okay, great. We are going to power through one more. BP 5111, our admission policy. Dr. Austin.
Happy to take these. That's right. We have 3 more policies,
Great.
all in relation to the registration services.
And I see Ms. Best is in the audience here.
That's right.
In case we need her.
So she's here to answer any questions. So
I don't know if you want to present all 3 of them together, if you anticipate separate issues with each of them, or if you just want to.
no, we're happy to present all 3 together, and we are trying to align ourselves with CSBA pretty much. The only difference is in relation to 6E. We're changing the number of the policy because for some reason our numbering system is off. So we are changing it to what the CSBA policy says, which is 5117.
Good catch, Ms. Best. Okay, so we're changing them to align with CSBA. We've all seen them in our packets. Let's start with Mr. Dauber. Mr. Dauber again.
But, so these are really just aligning
Yes.
these with CSBA. So I just recommend that we just put these on consent for next time if there's no more discussion or instruction to the BPRC around them.
Great. Ms. Payton-Caswell, do you have any questions, issues?
I just have some questions about just how we do certain things here. If a family, I'm looking at the first one, I guess I'm looking at the administrative regulation on it, on the admissions part. Can I ask a question about that? I know we're not voting.
We don't have to approve the AR, but if Ms.
I just
Payton-Caswell
want
has
to
a question about it.
understand, if you have, and I had a neighbor for whom this happened to, so I'm not making this up out of the blue. If you have a child that somehow gets the kindergarten curriculum before they turn 5, and they'll turn 5 after September 1st, is there a way for them to petition to skip kindergarten here? This family actually did and was, they did here. So that's why I'm just asking, are we?
Yeah, board policy already says that if a child has had a year of kindergarten, completed a year in a private or a public school, that they can skip to first grade. However, to get into kindergarten, it's required to have a board policy.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is to skip kindergarten, go into first grade, except it seems like our language here about first grade is dependent on September 1. And so what if your birthday is October 15th?
So you're asking if a parent can petition to get into kindergarten early?
No, first grade.
First grade early?
If they've had the kindergarten curriculum, they just didn't have it under us.
Correct.
Is there a petition, a way to petition for that?
They don't have to petition for it. It's in ed code that we can allow it if they give us documentation showing that the kindergartner, that the child had finished a kindergarten in a private or a public school. So they provide us with the document that says we finished kindergarten, and we promote them to first grade even though they're only age eligible for kinder.
Okay, the way, and again, we're not approving the administrative regs, but I think you need to go back and just check that that actually aligns with what's written here under first grade, because it sounds like it's different.
It is, that's CSBA language, which is derived from ed code. So we can look at it again
Yeah, I
and
mean,
make it more
sometimes-
clear. I don't
sometimes
think ed
CSBA
code's very clear.
Sometimes CSBA language, they've made assumptions, and it isn't specifically ed code, so
Yeah,
I suggest we take a look at that.
absolutely.
If I look at the district residency policy, which is a board policy, 5111.1, it says that when approved, this is on the second page, enrollment not requiring district residency. It says when approved by the board and the appropriate agency, a district may enroll students. Do we want to put in the word and when approved by the board or its designee? Because I don't remember ever having a family come in front of us to enroll a student that didn't have residency here, but I know that through Stanford and stuff, professors come in all the time, right, for short periods of time.
So
Or we have exchange students that come in.
So exchange students are covered under a different board policy, and they go through a foreign exchange service.
So
That's why we struck that from the.
So, no, but it's not struck in here. It says when approved by the board and the appropriate agency. We just never approved any. Have we just never had anybody that fits that category in the 11 years I've been on the board?
We have plenty of foreign exchange students, and the board does not need to approve those.
Okay, do you see where I'm reading from?
I'm sorry, I don't have the in front of me. But
Yeah, why don't, Ms. Fishcon, we're going to look at it.
Okay, we don't need to fix it. Are we vote? We're not voting right here, right? We're not
voting on the
discussing.
AR, but I think if we can just.
This is a board policy. This is not an AR.
It isn't.
Are we voting today, or we're just discussing today?
We're not. We're.
Okay, so we don't need to answer this right now,
Yeah.
but I'm just wondering how that works when I've never. Should we have the word and designee?
So if we
Or
can,
designee should be probably a good idea to add it, yes, because that's how we
If you
operate.
could take a look at that. I have one more question, and then you can be done with me.
go ahead.
And it's about a different AR. It's about the AR 5117, the one about interdistrict attendance.
Yes.
The board policy that goes with this took out option 2, but the AR doesn't have option 2 removed.
Oh,
Meant to be removed.
meant to
So
be
if you
removed,
go
yeah.
to
Okay,
the
so
la-
it will be
yeah.
removed then.
So if you go to the very last page of
I
that
have it
AR, there is a comment which says strike CSBA option 2, but it's 2 pages long, so that's why you're not seeing the comment, but it is, we are meant to take option 2 off.
Okay, so
already in the
option 2 is out of the AR.
Yeah.
Excellent, okay. My questions are all answered.
all right, thanks.
Great. Mr. Collins? Mr. Up?
Nothing.
Mr. Dauber?
No, I guess so what we're going to do is make the change that Ms. Baden-Caswell suggested around designee and then bring it back on consent, is that right?
I'm on it, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just
I
try-
think that.
I'm just trying to clarify for my own.
The second concern that Ms. Baten-Caswell had is already struck. It's just on a different page. And the first one, we're going to add the word designee, and we will likely bring this back on consent. Do you two have anything that you need to add about these? Great. I've got nothing. I look forward to seeing this next time, very likely on consent. Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break? Although, yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break. I know, but that's not going to be quick. We'll be back at 8:30. Let's come on back. I don't think everyone's here yet, are they? It feels unnecessary. Okay, we are reconvening at 8:32. Let's move on to our information items. As a reminder, our information items are items where there is not a staff report. It is just information that we want to elevate to the community. So if we take them as a whole, we've got 5 items on here. And yes, you may make a point about one, Dr. Austin.
This will be very quickly. Item E is here as a foreshadowing. It is routine in nature and will return on our next agenda under consent. So I'll let you know that will reappear.
Great. 7A, we already have a card for, so I'm going to call that one out. Because there is no staff report, let's start with our public comment. Kimberly Ng Lee. No more cards for this, right? Good. I know you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I was hoping there'd be a staff report. Kimberly Ng Lee. I'm speaking about, or have questions about, the Algebra 1 1A pilot.
Can you go a little closer to the mic?
Yep. Okay. Kimberly Ng Lee. I am puzzled about the Algebra 1 1A pilot that started in school year 2016-17. I'm guesstimating that this is probably about 25 to 30% of the freshman class. And we don't actually get any assessment of our high schoolers until their junior year when they take the SBAC. I'm here because I'm concerned about our most at-risk students, the ones who are historically underrepresented, come in with disabilities, and enter high school at a disadvantage. So in the fall of 2016, after the pilot was introduced, I presented to the Gun Site Council, just wanted to be sure that they were actively monitoring the new pilot. Shortly thereafter, I met with Dave Degler, who is the new math instructional supervisor at Gun, and the manager of the pilot program, and the assistant principal, who is actually not with the school anymore, along with another parent from the math curriculum selection committee. These are the notes that I took from that day. Our meeting was very instructive and detailed the support strategies for getting students progressing to higher levels of math. These include co-taught classes for students with identified math disabilities, aids in other sections, smaller class sizes, grading policy with multiple opportunities for mastery, and flex appointments required for struggling students. Project-based and problem-solving activities, additional math support classes for students with IEPs, and drop-in after-school support. They plan for a comprehensive program evaluation. The instructional supervisor actually said, "We will reflect on the pilot to decide whether to continue it. In the meantime, students are being supported in unprecedented ways." In March 2018, the district provided this data report, which reflected we were about 3/4 of the way into the pilot. And the Gun interim WASC report also indicated that they would continue to monitor the pilot. I'm puzzled. It's almost February of 2019. We are in year 3 of a 2-year pilot of Algebra 1 1A with no clear evidence of its impact or efficacy. What are the results from the final semester, 2017-18, or even the fall, 2018-19? What have we learned from the pilot about what works and doesn't work to help our most vulnerable students? I am puzzled. We have no actionable information, and we're releasing Gun's 2019-20 course catalog next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Dr. Austin, I wonder if you can talk to the community member's points that she just brought up. I'm particularly interested in, are we still in this pilot? And if we are, when should we expect to actually do the evaluation of it? What do you want to do with this? I mean, we have some information. We have 2 different reports. Where are we?
I think a couple things. If we would like to, I'm going to respond to that.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Mine's always weaker. Sorry. If we want to have a more detailed, robust discussion, we should bring this back, I think, as a differently agendized item. Tonight's information item was only at the request to bring back the report and not to necessarily prepare for long-term goal setting. But I do want to address some things, and I appreciate your question. As part of my preparation for this, I went back and watched the April of 2016 board meeting. And the first thing that struck me is that almost nobody in the room is still in their current position or employed here in this district. With the exception of maybe one of the teachers, every person who presented that night is no longer here, including the principal, the assistant superintendent, 3 of the 5 board members, the superintendent. So that was only 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. I think that is a common theme. And when you're starting to look at some things that were clearly promised that night, and when I review, I think things that I've heard about promises for future studies and evaluations of the program were absolutely promised and have not been delivered across the board. So the first question is, are we still in a pilot? I think that I see no alternative to that at this point in time. So I would not want to promise something that is undeliverable. What I do think we need is to rehash some of the things, and we don't need to do it here. I mean, I've already done it through a review of the original packet and through that board meeting. And you and Mr. Dauber were the two members on the board at that time. I think that there is additional study and review that's expected and should be provided. The good news is that now those students are in their junior year, and we can tell a couple things. First of all, we can look at their measurements from the CASP, and I think you've heard me say this before, at high school, I think that becomes less of a great indicator, but we can look at their grades, we can look and see if some of those things that were stated at that point held true. Did they make it through Algebra 2 this year? That is a benchmark piece of the third year of the pilot. But the final kind of shorter version of this answer, I think we have to consider this year 3 of a pilot. I think after going into next year, make a determination with everyone involved if it's the right path.
So you just said exactly what I was hoping you would say, which is we're going to evaluate this, and then we'll make a decision based on how we evaluate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Collins.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that too, because that seems right to me. I do think, I mean, there's a question in my mind about how much the board needs to be involved in that evaluation. I think that's substantially a staff, substantially, and thank you, I usually remind other people, substantially a staff issue. There's obviously lots of detail, and while this is an important course, it's one course. So I leave it to you and I guess the board president to figure out what should come before us and when. But this seems like mostly staff work. But, it's staff work that absolutely needs to get done. I think that's the reason the board was insistent on it back in the day is that they were concerned that it wasn't going to get done. And so, they kind of brought it to the board level and spelled it out. And what do you know, even then it didn't get done. So it just underscores the need for why we got to focus on getting this stuff done. The rest of these items all look good to me. So thank you.
Mr. Darrow.
I think that periodic evaluations are really important, especially with pilot programs, because we don't want a pilot program sort of stretching into perpetuity. So I agree to the extent that I would like to see this come back with staff recommendations, because I, for one, don't know how to interpret the results, just because I don't have the professional training and background. So I think staff are best prepared to tell us what they mean, what the implications are for the future, and how we move forward. So everything else looks good to me too.
Mr. Dauber.
Well, yeah, I don't have any interest in having this come back to the board because I don't think this has any board component to this work. The teachers in the math department at Gunn have decided that they, if I remember correctly, that teaching Algebra 1 and 1A separately disadvantaged some set of students. Those students in Algebra 1, they had aligned the content of those courses, and I think their whole sort of professional role is to, try things in the classroom and see if they work, and if they work, keep doing them, and if they don't, then try something else. I think the board's contribution to this is just not there, and I don't see why we would be concerned with this particular, pedagogical change as opposed to the many, many others that are going on in the classroom. So I think we've gone down unproductive road in the first place with this. And if you watch the meeting 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that's what I said. I didn't have any interest in this coming back then, and I don't see any benefit to it coming back now. I think there are some potential sort of unintended consequences of the board getting involved in, wanting to, have evaluations and reviews and board level discussions of changes like this, which is that it raises the cost to teachers of doing them. And I don't want to discourage teachers from, innovating and asking questions about what's the best pedagogical strategy and feeling like they have to, they're going to have to go through a whole board level process in order to make those kinds of adjustments. So I think it was wrong for us to get down this road in the first place, and the last thing I want to do is to, continue the process. If the math teachers at Gunn thinks it's a good idea, they should do it. If they don't think it's a good idea, I'm going to trust them to make that decision and try something else. So I strongly urge the board, the agenda setting committee, not to bring this back to us.
Thanks for weighing in there. Ms. Farrier, any thoughts?
No comments.
No.
Okay. I was happy to hear what you said. I think that obviously this can't be a pilot program forever. It is unclear from the data that is included in the information item whether this has been effective, and if there is not a difference, is it because it wasn't a good idea, or is it because it's not the right teachers, or it's not the right curriculum, or it's not the right class size, or who knows? But I tend to agree with Mr. Dauber on this one, that it's not, that's for staff to figure out. So I would agree that this should get done, but there is a chance that this won't be a board decision moving forward. We'll see where it goes, but I think that there's interest within staff to really evaluate the efficacy of this program, and the board supports that.
Can I just one thing on this? I think that we've made a commitment to have metrics on things, and then when we have metrics, to check in on them. And where I'm not sure we're going to add value in the conversation on this, I think having it brought back publicly to show that we in fact are doing a review when we do pilots and showing that we're closing them out, I think that we owe the community that.
So perhaps when the review is done, as an info session, as an info item, that it's there, but not for us to make a decision about. That's a staff decision to decide how to proceed.
Yeah, but I think they need to make that decision based on
Yes.
analyzing what they did, or we shouldn't then have any metrics if we're not going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just interject. I mean, we don't have a general commitment to produce metrics about everything that this organization does and provide it at the board level and then provide it to the community. We've identified a fairly small set of metrics that the board is going to monitor. There's thousands of pedagogical decisions going on across the district, all the time, that have implications for student performance.
But this,
I don't understand why this, how do we decide that this one or some other one gets elevated to, at a particular individual course level, gets elevated to a board discussion. I just
This was
don't.
brought to the board. That's why. It was brought to the board and a commitment was made.
No,
I think
there-
it's completely fair to bring it back and say what the closure was.
Well, if there's, who made the commitment, I guess, is the question. If that board made the commitment, I'm perfectly happy to change that commitment so that we don't have, I don't want to continue down a road of having this particular decision sort of subjected to a whole, years-long series of board-level discussions. I just don't, I don't see the benefit to it.
So I think
to
the important
students.
part here is that there's a pilot and its efficacy should be evaluated and we should make course corrections. Whether or not there's any action for the board to take, I do not think there is, but it doesn't mean that it will not wind up in an information item or we won't circle back about it. It's important to elevate to the community the result, the efficacy of that. And I think that we elevate a lot of those. I mean, we're more and more, we're having regular reports, just updates. Here's this information. I think that's fine. There's no decision for us to make on this. This is a staff decision.
So, I mean, just to recall, I watched a portion of the board meeting as well.
Just a portion.
What was committed, yeah, it was a lot to watch. What was committed to was that there would be a evaluation and there would be certain components of the evaluation that it would come back to the board. Actually, there was multiple steps that were supposed to be delivered. Most of them were skipped. So, I mean, I think to your point, if a commitment is made by staff, then that's the commitment. To your point, the board can always change its mind and say, no, you don't have to do that commitment. I think it would be good if staff didn't get the chance to say, well, new board, all commitments are off unless we decide, unless someone tells us we actually have to do it. That would be very bad since our board changes composition every 2 years. So I think it would be good if either we got something that reflected the original commitment, or we changed the direction to the staff to reflect it. Either one seems fine to me, but just from a process point of view, they did commit. There was a commitment made, and we should either change it to let them off the hook, or they should deliver on what they said they were going to do. At least that's the way it seems to me. I do agree, substantively, I agree with you. That's like, I don't see why this has to come to the board. I don't think it's a board decision, but that's what they said.
Okay, so well, I'm happy to move that the staff is absolved from responsibility for providing any more information to the board about this Algebra 1A thing.
I think I actually don't want to go that far. I think that staff has said that it's something that they're going to continue to evaluate. And
Yeah, I move that we communicate to staff that they need not bring forward to the board a report on the, this Algebra 1A class at Gunn.
I'll second that.
did you say a report? They don't need to bring a report
They
back?
don't need to bring any more communications to us about this topic. Yeah.
So absolving of the prior commitment.
Okay, we have a second?
Sure.
Any other discussion on it?
Yeah, I think that if we make a vote on this, why don't we can overturn everything. We can change, we can get rid of the calendar, we can get rid, we could just, that will be quite dysfunctional for this community. And we have a lot of people in the community who have spoken to me, particularly about people whose kids were in this class, have spoken not just to me, but to some of you as well, about how concerned they are that we haven't taken a real look about whether we're doing the right things. I think that we would be doing a disservice to not do a report out on a commitment we made on a metric on this program.
So I think this is a bigger question. This is the reason why this came to the board in the first place, and the reason why there's concern in the community now is because we are seeing our most at-risk kids being in a more vulnerable position if we're not finding classes that are meeting their needs. This is true of every course we offer to students, right? This is true at every grade level at each of our schools, that if they either have a course that's not effective, it's being taught in a way that's not effective, there's all kinds of things in every class. So I
Yeah,
think
you're
the
right,
bigger-
but
Wait a
they-
minute, let me finish. I think the bigger question is, when we're looking at our plan that's being developed now, and one of the issues is making sure we're better serving kids, making sure we're meeting A to G requirements, making sure kids are the pass rates are higher, making sure they're doing better on standardized tests. Those things are what we're working towards, and it's staff's responsibility to find those problems in every pocket. I don't know why this one is different than the other pockets where that might be happening.
Because staff came forward and they said, we wanted to try something different that we haven't done, and we want to do it as a pilot. And we said, fine, report back on how it goes. So I think this is silly. Why wouldn't we have a report back on how it is? It doesn't have to be a whole board debate about the results, but we do need it reported out. That to me doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, I'm going to take a look at where we are right now, which is a report from March, and it looks like a dismal failure. But I don't know that that's in fact true. So I would like us to have a conclusion. This is what the community thinks right now, is that this was a failure. And maybe we need to change directions and spend our resources differently.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Drop, do you have any?
No.
You don't have to, I'm just wondering if you
I
do.
don't.
Okay, Mr. Dauber, anything else?
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
I think the board, the way the board, if the board thinks that the math department at Gunn can't manage to make these kinds of pedagogical decisions, then I think the right thing to do isn't to ask for reports to make sure that they did their job. It's to ask the superintendent, to take on a managerial issue. I actually think I have full confidence in the math department at Gunn. I think the fact that that this is the kind of thing that they're trying is an excellent indication that they're doing a good job. So I'm not interested in suggesting to the superintendent that he has a problem there, but I just don't see any benefit and some real demerits to continuing to get engaged at this level in an individual course decision.
Do you have something now?
Yes. I suppose if we're thinking about this in the bigger picture sense, what do we do and how do we evaluate pilot programs? I think I tend to agree that it wouldn't make much sense for us as a board to have to evaluate and look at reports on every pilot program that the district engages in, because I think then that would be, well outside the realm of our responsibility as the board, and then we would be taking away some of that from the staff who are in charge of it. So in that sense, I think, because I do think weighing the two considerations, I do agree that there has to be some level of accountability when it comes to pilot programs we put into place and promises we make as to how things are going to go forward and evaluations. But if we as a board have trust in our superintendent and our staff in our departments that they're going to be accountable, then I suppose that's the question we're really asking here is do we need to evaluate everything, or do we trust that we have hired the right superintendent who has put the right team in place, who is going to make those decisions that are going to be in the best interest of the community as we have directed? And so I agree with Mr. Dauber and Mr. Collins in that sense.
Can I just add one thing to maybe try to tie it together? So that all makes sense to me, and I'm going to support the motion. I do think Ms. Bing-Caswell makes a good point, which is that this has been elevated in the mind of the community, that a lot of people are interested in this. I got emails about this. I've talked to people about it. We have public speakers coming and talking about it. So, this is, for whatever historical reasons, kind of got a lot of visibility. So if we vote to not bring this back to the board or require them to bring it back to the board, Dr. Austin, I think it might be wise. There might be public interest in seeing what you guys come up with, and you might want to think about how to share it because there's community interest in it. Whether that would be at a board meeting or some other way or whatever way you guys thought was useful, I think, if there's community interest, why not give them some information? But I don't think this is necessary board work, so I don't think it's needful to, I think we can let them off the hook for the board evaluation.
Ms. Furrier.
No comment.
No comment.
Okay. I think my opinion stands where it did a few minutes ago here, that the bigger issue is supporting our most at-risk students and making sure that kids have equitable access to algebra or whatever it is. And that's the meat of it. Now, as Ms. Payton-Caswell said, this was a promise that a different board made years ago. There's clearly some community interest in it. So it does make sense to me, as I said earlier, that there's an information item in it once it's done. I mean, the work has been committed, so it's not a question of a board report back. It's a question of when the work is done, elevated to the community so they can see it. So in that sense, I'm not sure I agree with your proposal, with your motion, thank you, because an update to the pilot was promised, and clearly there's an interest in seeing it. I have no doubt that the work is going to get done, so I'm not sure what the harm is in making this an info item. I do think that we have gotten better about deciding what is board work and what is staff work. So I think in the future, I think now currently we're more careful about, wait, is this something that should come to the board or not? But at that time, the board made a decision and said that this was something that we were going to get an update on. If staff is going to evaluate it, which staff has committed to doing, I think once that work is done, it's a great idea to elevate it. I think you guys can decide how you're going to elevate it, but it should be elevated. So that's it. So I think we're at a place where we want to vote yes.
Quick question. Is it possible for us to both vote yes for the motion at the same time as a board direct staff to bring it back?
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think that Mr. Dauber's motion is not to bring it back to an agenda in any way, shape, or form.
I thought it was to absolve staff of their responsibility to bring it back at their promise made by the last board, while still potentially directing them to also bring it back in this specific instance.
You can always do that.
Yeah, Mr. Dauber, can you state what your motion is?
Yeah, I don't think that's consistent with what I'm.
Yeah, could you state your motion again?
My motion is to rescind, I suppose. I would say this, my motion is to direct staff that they have no obligation to return to the board with a report on this topic. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a vote on that. A student board member, preferential vote?
Abstain.
Colleagues, all those in favor of Mr. Dauber's proposal, of Mr. Dauber's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so 3-2. Okay.
I think we just made a decision that will potentially have ramifications on everything the board decides.
Well, in that case, we can change it.
Well, okay.
Luckily, it can be changed with a vote.
Looking at the other information items, you'll see that there is an information item on the Title IX update, the legal expenses report, Let's Talk, and the SARCs, the School Accountability Report Cards, all 17 of them as separate documents. Does anybody have any comments or questions about any of those items?
I have several comments about the SARC. Actually,
About SARC.
no, I'm just kidding. I don't.
Still got comedy here after 9 p.m. I'll just go around. Mr. Drop, do you have any questions about any of them?
Nope.
Mr. Auber?
No,
Ms.
thank you.
Payton-Caswell?
I have a request that, Dr. Austin, that we get a report on the A through G, what's going on with our A through G, which we've asked for a while. No, because the SARP it's part of this. I mean, I can hold that to board operations if you want to. One of the things to me that's just interesting is the gap between our graduation rate, which is pretty stellar, and our A through G completion rate, which is good but not stellar. And I think that it would be good to understand it, and that I think this highlighted it to me, just that we don't really understand it. Maybe staff understands it, but I don't really understand it. There was just a couple of other things, because I looked at this ad nauseum, and I noticed a strange thing with their fitness test completion. We're all over the map. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Some schools seem to have fitness, we seem to be doing really well in the fitness test. This isn't my biggest priority. It just seemed odd to me that some places we were at like in the 70s and 60s in completion of the fitness test, and some places we were at like very, very low numbers.
We can figure that out for you, get it in an update.
Yeah, that would be fine. And then the other thing that I noticed, which I know we're going to look at on a regular basis with the promise, is that it appears that our suspension rates at the middle schools have gone up across the board, which I'm sure is part of why you want to track this, so.
It is.
Okay.
I have no other comment on that.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to track it too.
Okay. Is that it for you?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Collins?
I just want to point out that I actually did read the SARC reports and did find one minor data anomaly that I know is going to be fixed in an update, so thank you. Already is fixed.
Great.
But I want credit for
And I want credit for fixing it.
Thank you.
I have no questions about anything. I just noted that the data in the SARC are interesting, and opening 17 separate documents made it a little choppy, like, oh, I'm wondering how SED students at Ohlone versus Carmelo. Some sort of executive summary on one sheet with the numbers would be great, although I know they're in different places. But this was set up nicely. So if it's possible to put it all in one doc at some point.
I mean, the SARC is usually on the school website.
Right.
I mean, that's how most people access it, and that's what it's for
But school by school
level
to be able to,
accountability.
yeah.
I mean, district
That's where
people
we
aren't
are.
usually looking at SARC. They're more for parents to look at schools, right?
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah,
It seems not an unreasonable question. Sounds like work, though.
okay. Mr. Rocker? Okay.
So every year we've asked for that.
The
summary sheet.
executive summary.
Yeah, every year.
We'll see. No, usually, I think it's usually of the
And the SIPSs, when the SIPSs
right?
come in, every year we ask for the summary
Because
sheet.
the SIPSs are,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so it's similar data.
yeah.
I did want to say one thing that was really nice is I did see the math results seem to be on average going up. So not on every school, but so I'm hoping that the work that we're doing has made that impact.
Okay, on to board reports. Board operations. Board, yeah, it says reports, operations. All of operations. Anything? Great. Mr. Dauber?
So to follow up on a point that Ms. Baden-Caswell raised, and I think we mentioned something around this maybe at our board retreat on A to G graduation rates. We talked about quite some time ago understanding the gap between what I think the board expected to see with respect to A to G graduation rates and what we're actually seeing, which is a lower rate of A to G graduation rates, particularly for minority students and socioeconomically disadvantaged students. I don't understand, I don't think any of us have heard about, what are the specific causes of those gaps between expectations and reality. So I would like to see us bring that to a board meeting in the near future as a report, so that we can get clarity on, what's actually going on there.
Yeah.
It's on the calendar, right?
Was it on the calendar?
It's on the big.
It is on the secret whiteboard. So yes. It
Can
is
you divulge
the secret whiteboard that is completely public? Yes, it is going to be a standing report, and we're working through some issues. We want to make sure that what we present, we have high levels of confidence in the accuracy, and right now, we do not. And it's more complicated than I can probably get into right now, but we're working through that right now. It is a priority to make sure that if we're giving you information that has perceived value, we want to make sure that it is accurate. So, yes, it is in motion, but if it was a push a button output, you'd already have it. It's not. We're working through it.
Okay, I'll probably raise that again.
Yes.
Just because I think this is really critical, and I think that we probably should have already addressed this and brought it, to the, I should have been asking for this earlier, and because I think it's so important, so, thanks.
I do too.
Ms. Bancastle, I know you've got some CalSSD stuff.
I went to CalSSD, and it was like a fire hose. We had so many presenters. Just for those of you that don't know, the California Association of Suburban School Districts is a lobbying group for us. They also are a group that keeps us up to date on a lot of legislation. So the people that came and spoke to us spent a lot of time on the governor's budget, since it had just come out. And we had presenters from AXA and CSBA, but also from the Legislative Analyst's Office talking about early childhood education. And there was a lot of good material. I'm not going to go through it all. I'm just giving you a heads up that there's a lot in these handouts. There's even more if you have questions. They are available to give us more information. They talked to us about TK. They gave some stuff that I didn't know about, and I don't know how much we know. We also had the Chief Deputy Superintendent for the Department of Education spoke to us, and she was fabulous. They really, really believe that Gavin Newsom will be much more involved on the detailed level in everything. We went through Governor Brown, who just said do everything at the local level, but that doesn't seem to be Gavin Newsom's style. So I think we need to be aware of this, and it will impact legislation. There's also a list of all the legislation that's up and coming, and a list of the legislative priorities for this group for the coming year that we can influence. And so we had talk about many of these things, but if there's something on here that you think we should influence more, this is the time to do it now while they're still framing it up. Yeah, Vicki will give you all copies when I give it to her after this meeting.
All right, Mr. Collins. I don't think I have anything to report right now. Do you guys have anything to report? You already had your reports at the beginning. We did get Shanik. You didn't have anything. Yeah, you guys did at the beginning. Okay. Meeting adjourned.